This is tipping culture at its most toxic and unethical here in the US. Some medical spas are now asking us to tip licensed healthcare professionals, like registered nurses or physician's assistants, for invasive procedures like laser facials, Botox, or fillers. Here's what's happening and how things got so bad in the US compared with other countries. For example, I recently had a laser facial done at the national med spa chain Skin Laundry with a registered nurse. Skin Laundry hires RNs to do laser facials, as seen in these job listings. They make about half their salary from tips and commission. At the end, I was asked to tip up to $30 for the service valued at $275. I reluctantly paid $15 because I didn't want to seem cheap. And this is not the first medical spa I've seen ask for tip on an invasive procedure. One thing to note, it's perfectly fine to tip at a medical spa for regular spa services, like a facial or massage. But asking for tip on procedures that can harm your body if done wrong is controversial, because it can make customers feel that the quality of their service is linked to how much they tip. Tipping is not ethical in traditional healthcare because of the idea that workers should always do their best work on someone's health and not be influenced by tips. As one Skin Laundry customer said on Reddit, "As this is a recurring service where I am face-to-face with the same people who literally have control over my face, I find the tip culture at minimum awkward, if not unethical." What makes things more awkward and potentially unethical at Skin Laundry is that whether you tip or not plays a role in the nurse earning a fair wage and being in good standing with their employer. In one Reddit thread, a former Skin Laundry nurse says, "You have to rely on gratuity to make up for the salary you should be getting from the company." Customers have also complained on Reddit that they feel pressured to compensate for the company not paying their nurses a fair wage. Skin Laundry RN wages vary a bit depending on where you live. But in Southern California job listings, they make a base wage of $28 per hour, plus tips and commission, for a guaranteed wage of $55 per hour. That means the additional $27 per hour relies on the nurse performing and selling. And if the nurse isn't able to earn that much, it sounds like the company will cover the rest. That practice mirrors the law for tipped workers in the US. The federal minimum wage for tipped workers is $2.13, while the federal minimum wage for everyone else is $7.25. However, if you're making the tipped minimum wage and you're unable to make up to the minimum wage in tips, your employer must cover the rest. But if you're costing your employer extra money, it might carry the guilt and stigma of not performing up to standard, therefore creating extra incentive to perform and sell. Compensating nurses based on commission incentivizes them to act as salespeople, potentially selling you on services you don't actually need and could actually be bad for you. For example, back in 2022, I had a subscription to Skin Laundry that got me 2 laser facials per month. And if I didn't use both, they wouldn't roll over to the next month. A previous medical spa had advised me to never do laser facials more than once a month. But my Skin Laundry nurse assured me that twice a month is totally fine. So I started getting laser facials every 2 weeks and developed horrible post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, or PIH, on my cheeks a couple months into my subscription. PIH is a known risk of doing too much laser or the wrong laser, which I was not made aware of. And I've spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars trying to get rid of it ever since. But I digress. So why is tipping culture so uniquely toxic and out of control in the US? Because the US is one of the only countries, if not the only country, where there's a minimum wage for tipped workers and a different minimum wage for everyone else inscribed in law.
As far as I know, the United States is the only country that exempts tipped workers from having to receive the full minimum wage.
By paying tipped workers so little, companies can afford to charge customers less upfront. These workers then rely on your tips to make a living wage. That's why tipping in the US has always been seen as a mandatory moral obligation, which means the cost of whatever you're buying balloons at the end. But having a lower sticker price feels better for customers psychologically. In other countries, a worker's full salary is already baked into the cost of goods, so tipping is a no-pressure option. In the US, the moral obligation to tip has recently spiraled into people feeling pressured, resentful, and guilt-tripped. That's because more companies began capitalizing on people's sense of obligation to ask for increasingly higher tips on things you don't normally tip for, like handing you coffee or a takeout. After all, new technology, these tablets from companies like Square, Toast, and Clover, have made it super easy for businesses everywhere to passively ask for tip, from med spas to cafes, ice cream shops, fast food, and food trucks. Now, in order to not tip, you have to actively press no tip, which makes you feel guilty. I've traveled to 40 countries across Asia, Europe, South America, and the Middle East. And usually the price you see is the price you get. Sometimes a service charge of 5 to 10% is included or expected at places that genuinely provide good service. And I never minded that at all. In the US, many want to abolish the minimum wage for tipped workers, which could help solve this crisis. So far, 7 states have already gotten rid of it. California, where I live, is one of them. But tipping culture is still out of control here. So maybe change needs to happen on a larger scale, so tipping can revert back to an act of gratitude instead of obligation. And we no longer feel pressured to tip when we don't want to, like at the med spa. Do you think asking for tip on procedures like laser, Botox, and fillers is unethical? And how would you handle the situation? Let me know in the comments below.